Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by rockauto.com. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Thank you, Alec Webb. Welcome, everyone, to MotorWeek podcast number 242. And with us today, our writer, two-wheeling reporter, Brian Robinson.
Hello.
Yeah, don't recognize you, Brian, without your two wheels around you. Our over-the-edge reporter, Greg Carlos.
Hello, hello.
Who we normally see with four wheels around him. And it's just the three of us today, so nice and cozy, but we got plenty to talk about. New vehicles. We'll look at our long-term fleet. We've got a lightning round question, a viewer question from Kathy, and we'll see if the three of us have any rants and raves. Boy, what a fall. And, you know, it looked like earlier in the year that the auto industry might make a pause in some of its new models, but then I've forgotten which car company was saying, hey, you know, once these new models start rolling into the from the design phase into the manufacturing, you really can't stop it. And we're being inundated with new model offerings, and a lot of them are either electric or electrified. And so the first vehicle we're going to talk about today is BMW's first all-electric SUV, the iX. And if there was ever something that looked like it was a true Tesla fighter, and even in some ways in the Tesla mold, I think it's the iX, especially the interior. What do you two think about it? 300-mile range, that seems pretty competitive.
Yeah, it's a striking design on the outside, and it's roughly the dimensions of an X5, but it's not the X5 platform. It's an all-new platform, which I mean is a huge deal for BMW. As you mentioned, it's their first all-electric SUV, and that is a super hot segment. I mean, SUV,
right.
Gasoline or EV, I mean, that's what people want. Yeah, over 300 miles of range, and that's estimated on the EPA, based on the EPA certification process, not the European cycle. And then,
it'll be more in Europe.
Right,
it'll
right.
be more, yeah. So
yeah. They didn't say battery size yet, but we do know that it'll charge 75 miles, so about 5 to 80% in roughly 10 minutes. DC fast charger, 500 horsepower, and should be here in 2022. And this is the production version. It's not even a concept, and it looks pretty darn good.
Yeah, it looks legit. Certainly will compete with the e-tron and the e-pace and all of those. It's got more range than the e-tron. I like the looks of it. Oddly enough, it looks similar to the i3 in some ways, the back of it, like it merged with the X5. The range is right there with everything else. The interior is pretty spectacular. It's got the same kind of eco fabric and wood and all sustainably sourced materials like the i3 did. And it looks like there's a ton of space in there. All-wheel drive with the twin motor setup. So it looks like it should be pretty competitive.
It still has the big kidney grill,
which they don't need.
Speaking of
they
that,
don't need.
Well, they kind of.
But it actually looks good.
Well, I'm not sure I'd go that far, but they actually incorporated all the sensors, and there's a whole like multiple paragraph thing in the press kit about everything they integrated into the grills, just because they knew everyone would be like, "Well, why did you have the grills on there?" But
I mean, it's a BMW.
Well, we've seen that new upright in-your-face twin kidney grill on a couple of models now, and we haven't really particularly cared for it. But I don't know what they did on the iX. It actually looks like, I don't know if it belongs there or more fitting, maybe because it's an SUV. But that interior with those twin screens almost all the way across the instrument cluster, it's still looking expensive, something I don't think, you know, the minimalist idea and the Tesla necessarily does. Like you said, it's pretty spectacular. So what about the interior for you, Brian? You're usually a contrarian.
Oh, I'm not. Wow. Okay, you're gonna label me. All right.
You are.
I know we were using labels, but no, I'm the one.
Well, if it fits.
I love the interior of it. I love the i3, the way they had all those fabrics and I think bamboo they had in there. I'm not sure how far they'll go with that kind of stuff, but yeah, it's got one-piece seats, which is new for BMW. No headrest. and you can integrate speakers into them. I'm not sure about the hexagonal steering wheel. I mean, we've got basically that in the new Corvette, and I wasn't a fan of that there either. But I think it looks pretty great.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the interior right now because I'm trying to describe to just our listeners. It's
Yeah,
so
we should do that because we can't forget there's no pictures here.
Yeah, the steering wheel compared to the Corvette, Brian, I feel like is a little bit taller. Like the Corvette was like very flattened, which I also didn't like. I think it looks a little bit better here, but I like so the center console was like kind of like a floating thing that juts out heading toward the center screen, but it actually doesn't connect up to the dash. It doesn't look like, which is pretty cool because you can you could theoretically just throw something from the driver's side to the passenger side, and there's no tunnel to get in the way.
And you've got this wide screen, which is actually a flat screen for the instrument cluster and your infotainment screen together in one rectangular piece sitting above, almost like a big screen TV sits at home, the actual IP, and above very clear and substantial vents, which, Tesla has often been criticized because their vents are too small. You still got iDrive, it looks like, on that console you were talking about. But I think it's a nice looking place that it looks futuristic. I don't know what else to say, except all the concepts we've seen, this looks like, what they have been promising, but not quite delivered.
I feel like we're going in reverse of what we were saying a few years ago when we wanted all of our EVs to look like normal road going cars that we've seen for decades. Now we're like, now I want it to be more futuristic again. And I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing, because we're seeing with Tesla and now BMW, Audi, they're all kind of pushing the envelope again. And, now I'm back to thinking, all of our cars should look futuristic.
Well, the future is, what future is now here, but I think clearly they're looking at what the upper crust buyer wants, and they've been buying Teslas, and they want a piece of that market. I mean, it's like, if you can't fight them, join them.
Yeah, I think
you can't beat them, join them.
I think the BMW, it's futuristic and it's a little bit different, but it's not crazy different and crazy weird.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a limit there. We want it a little different. We just don't want it unlike anything we've ever seen before. Which, if you want to use that for a transition to the next car, that's fine too.
Well, that is a great transition. So let's look at something a little bit more normal and, frankly, a whole lot more probably affordable. The 2020 Hyundai Tucson that was unveiled just a few days before we did this podcast. My first reaction was bolder, much more interesting looking. I imagine it probably drives like a bigger vehicle. It looks like a nice step up, nothing terribly radical, but lots of different choices of powertrains, hybrid, plug-in. Yeah. So what do you think?
Going back to the whole futuristic interior thing, they've kind of gone to the next step again. Everything on the dash, or I'm sorry, not the dash, the console where the touchscreen is all touch. I don't see any buttons on there. And the new big thing, which I meant to mention in the BMW iX, is the the whole hoodless gauge cluster design, because now screens are getting so good with the TFT displays where they don't really glare at all. So now you have this really beautiful looking IP, which a lot of car companies are going with now. It looks good.
Yeah, it does look to me like there's some manual controls underneath the center stack screen. Go ahead, Brian. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's definitely bigger, and they stretched the wheelbase, which adds a lot of interior space. Definitely needed. Not as much cargo space as like the CR-V and RAV though. So it's kind of a give and take there. But as far as the looks, I mean, they just tried to out-RAV the RAV, I guess. It looks really, I don't even know how to describe it. It's not the great. It wasn't it wasn't the greatest looking vehicle to begin with. It definitely needed an update, but I'm not sure that this was what I had in mind.
Well, yeah. Let's talk about that. I mean, everything's got to have seems like this big mean face on it, and it's pretty blunt looking. I mean, it has a little bit of the Palisades features towards the headlights going to points almost as you wrap around the front fascia. But that grill, it's like a 1, 2, 3, 4 level grill. It just looks like a battering ram, or like you used to see on the front of police cars to push you off the interstates if you got stuck. It looks pretty brutish.
I don't even mind the front so much. It's the side. There's just so many angles going on, and the fenders like bulge way out. There's like fake rivets or some kind of machine-looking things in the fenders. I don't know. It looks like a little much for me.
It looks like the old style 1930s fender flares that come back from the wheel well arches towards the center of the door, but in front. And then, like you said, these really, almost like, what do you call it when anyway, bulging rear fenders that look just strange. And it's got to take some interior room, you would think. So it definitely was done for style.
Well,
People will have to. I think it's going to be a very polarizing looking vehicle.
yeah. Before we beat it to death, I was just going to say the powertrain.
No, I don't think we're beating it to death. It's different.
No, well, yeah.
Go
I
ahead.
mean, something less subjective, I guess, is what I'm going for. Is the powertrains? They have the 2.5 liter, which I assume would be the standard. And then you have the 1.6 turbo, which will actually be. I think they have two versions of it. One will be a high output for the plug-in hybrid version, which will get 28 miles of EV range with a bigger battery. But just the regular hybrid, no plug-in, 226 total horsepower, and they're saying 500 miles of total range, which, I mean, again, you're not going to be getting EV range because this is just the standard hybrid. But, again, being able to offer multiple powertrains, it's always a good thing.
Yeah,
I think
competitive with the rest of the segment. But of all segments, I think this one is the one they needed to try the hardest in. Like almost every segment, Hyundai's very competitive in. This one, the Tucson's just not there with the RAV and the CRV. But hopefully this will change it. I know all that space inside will help a lot.
Well, this has basically been the bottom of their line, and it drove like it barely had a suspension on it, and then they redid it and got better. And as we've watched Hyundai products, they keep consistently improving. So I think you're right. I mean, we haven't had a chance to drive it yet, of course, but it's probably going to turn out to be much more than just a one step up, but probably a couple. We'll see. Very interesting vehicle. And like we said, they keep on coming. Let's take something we don't do very often on the podcast, and we're going to kind of pause from stuff that's so new we barely even seen it, to our long-term vehicles, which we use every day for crew and on the weekends for our personal use. Let's start with over on the Kia side of the Hyundai-Kia relationship, the Kia Seltos. It's actually our newest long-termer. Been a surprising vehicle, I think, in some ways. What do you guys think?
I've had it for about 2 weeks now. I've been driving it a lot, so I've gotten used to it. And it took some getting used to, especially with the powertrain, because the engine, we have the 1.6 turbo with the 7-speed dual clutch. The engine is willing. I mean, that thing gets up and goes. As my dog walks in behind frame.
Yeah.
It's the transmission that kind of gets a little bit tripped up sometimes. It seemed like when you're slowing down and then have to speed back up again. Sometimes it just doesn't quite engage. And it's more often that it's fine than it isn't, but I do think it is something to note. And fuel economy right now, as of our last test, was 28 miles per gallon, which is pretty good. I don't think it's great, but it's pretty good.
Yeah, I spent a couple weeks on it a while back. It's pretty roomy in there for the exterior size, I thought, and it drives pretty decent for a small utility.
Yeah, I fit a whole bathroom vanity in there, so
It says a lot. A double sinker?
Nah, just a single
Oh,
24
just a
incher.
single. Okay.
Yeah.
The other small utility that we've had in our fleet for quite a while now, which has always surprised me on how well it drives on the highway, is the 2020 Fiat 500X. A lot of people, this was Fiat's very first SUV. And I know I walked up to it thinking, well, let's, what do we have here? And I came away very impressed that despite sort of looking semi-rugged, that it drove really like a nice, small, European tuned sedan, and found it quite pleasurable on long trips. I haven't driven it in a few weeks, but overall, a very big surprise and very different from its counterpart over at Jeep, I think. What about you?
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time in that one lately. I go back and forth on it.
Mhm.
I kind of don't want to like it, but the more time I spend in it, I do like it. If that makes any sense. It actually
Sure.
does. It actually does drive really nice, and just
Yeah.
that bright blue color, and it's got the dash's body color, that bright blue. It's just kind of a happy car. It just kind of makes you happy when you drive it.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah,
When you think about
the
it.
only frustrating thing is the throttle. Sometimes with that little turbo, it's like an on-off switch. Sometimes it
Mm.
it gives you a little more than what you're expecting, which is not always a bad thing, but I like it.
Anything
I
to
know
add, Greg?
Yeah, I know exactly what Robinson's talking about. It's, I mean, I think we both have similar personalities. We're not very loud people, but the car kind of is, and it's not quite a look at me vehicle, but it has that like Fiat personality where it is
Yeah.
about style. And every time I get into it, I'm surprised that I expect to not like it, and then I end up liking it by the time I get out.
The third vehicle we're going to mention, and actually we're going to go through our whole fleet here, Hyundai Palisade. A surprise, not so much of a surprise hit for Hyundai, but I would say the Hyundai Palisade, along with the Telluride at Kia, has certainly brought those two brands as serious players in the large SUV ranks. I've driven the Palisade mostly, 25 plus miles per gallon. Very comfortable, interesting interior. It looks quite luxurious for a Hyundai, and actually I had a number of questions about whether we thought that upscale look that we've seen both in the Palisade and in the Telluride is going to spread out to the rest of the vehicles. And I think from the Seltos and also from the Tucson, we can say it is to some degree. Very comfortable for long trips. The seats, though, are, when you get in them, you really don't think they're going to be comfortable. They look comfortable, but they're really quite hard. But it's hard in the European vein, and you end up basically saying after 6 hours, they're quite, you're not tired when you get out. Great powertrain as far as acceleration, big in the back, seats fold flat. Really, looking at it versus Highlander and Pilot, it's a 100% competitive vehicle. And I know most of you folks and a lot of other journalists seem to prefer the U.S.-made Telluride to the imported Palisade. But that, I guess, saying back and forth between the two of them, I really don't see that much difference in ride handling or anything else. Although I think the Telluride is probably selling a little better, although I'm not sure of that.
Yeah, I don't.
Anything
I
to
haven't
Definitely see
really-
more
comment?
of them.
Yeah, so I don't
Yeah.
have anything to add, but I do know I've seen a lot of Palisades around. They must be selling
Yeah.
them like crazy, more than I would have expected.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't go anywhere without one of them passing you. Either that or a Telluride. Another one, though, that's in our fleet that I think we'd have to all agree has been a very pleasant surprise, the 2019 Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV. It's plug-in hybrid. Again, that you talk about, Brian, not wanting necessarily to like the 500X. That was kind of the way I approached the Outlander, thinking, it's overall kind of an old design, and the interior looked at, but wow, what a nice vehicle. What a really impressive vehicle to drive.
Yeah, I absolutely enjoy driving it. I mean, I haven't been in it in a
Mhm.
while. One of our staff members has been living in that thing since March, I think. So he's definitely sheltering in place with that one. Uh, It's impressive to drive, just all the power between the all-wheel drive electric and gas engine. It's super fast and it's fun to drive. But on that same note, I don't think you get the mileage that you should be getting out of it, perhaps. Maybe that's just the way I'm driving, and maybe that's a lot of our staff that don't plug it in as regularly as they could. But I think
Yeah.
our fuel economy numbers could be a lot better, and I would like it more.
I think if you had it every day as a commuting vehicle, you really would be behoven to plug it in every night and get that, what is it, 14 miles worth of EV every day out of it. Any comment, Greg?
I agree on all counts. People like to kind of shame Mitsubishi and they just assume it's a bad vehicle, but it really isn't.
No.
It's comfortable first and foremost, which I did not expect at all. To the point of fuel economy, I feel like I do end up stopping more to fill up because it's not a necessarily big tank and it'll go through it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But again, if you're into short commutes, grocery store runs, taking kids to practices or lessons, the 14 miles of range is a big help.
Most people only commute about 20 miles a day, so really they can cut your fuel economy costs down by, roughly a third. Now that, everybody's sort of, including myself, expected maybe Mitsubishi might disappear, but now that they're basically in the alliance with Nissan and Renault, they're here to stay and they're introducing new vehicles. So I think this vehicle has kept them relevant, and it's a good base for them to build on. And it's been a very, very good serving long-term vehicle for us. Done a lot of trips with the crews. Okay, let's move on from individual vehicles to our lightning round, and to see what we each think about this particular topic that our producer, Greg Carlos, has picked out. A recent study by iSeeCars.com, don't you love some of these websites, compared used car prices in October of 2019 to sales in October of 2020, and found that buyers paid on average of 9.5% more this year than they did last year. The BMW 5 Series showed the biggest average increase in price, but the top 10 is dominated by, guess what, pickup trucks and even a few sports cars. What does this say about the state of the used car market, besides the fact it's pretty hot?
I don't think we expected the pandemic to affect the used car market too much, because if anything, there are going to be more used cars available. I think the issue with the pickup trucks is what they said was a lot of them had to shut down production. So there was really an inventory problem with new pickups.
Mm-hmm.
So people who needed one went to the used car market and they're like, hey, we got them. You're going to have to pay for them. So that, I think used car prices have gone up anyway. So that wasn't necessarily pandemic related, but I do think some of it should be attributed to the COVID situation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about the supply. Even still, new cars are in short supply at some dealers. Just had a Porsche dealer last week, and they literally have like 6 cars. They can't get anything from Germany yet since the pandemic started. So things are definitely, as far as the sports cars, things are definitely in short supply. But I believe with our local guy down the road from me, he's always had like 30, 40 cars on his lot. He's got maybe 12, 15 now, and they're in and out constantly. People are buying used cars like crazy right now.
It was kind of a long question or topic anyway, but there was a lot of interesting things like convertibles are also way up. People are buying convertibles.
I was going to mention that. It's like people have got the money. They want to buy something. They're home. They're buying something fun. And all of a sudden, you're seeing a lot more convertibles, tops down on 50-degree days with the heater blowing. And I think that's also has something to do with the sports cars. And, the 5 Series historically has not maintained its value that terribly well. And the fact that it's up so much, again, and it's a wonderful car, says something about maybe people are also making some purchases that are a little more passion oriented than they would in normal times. I don't know.
It's also, It's a sedan too, and we've said for how many
Yeah,
years now
exactly.
people aren't buying sedans. Well, apparently they're buying
Right.
used BMW 5 Series.
And I don't blame them. It's probably one of the, I mean, every time we've had one of the last couple of generations in, we've just raved and said it's almost the perfect automobile. So very interesting. Okay, we've got a viewer question from Kathy, and you talk about subjective. This is about a very subjective area. Since we see all makes of cars, she asked, which cars have the most comfortable driver's seat? Now, comfort is different things to different people, because she goes on to say, Consumer Reports, it looks like luxury cars, in their opinion, have the softest seats, but they don't necessarily want to have to buy a luxury car. So in non-luxury vehicles, would we steer them anyway? Should we? Or what should they be looking for?
I don't know if you consider Volvo a luxury brand, but hands down, Volvo has the best seats across the board of any
Do,
manufacturer.
do you think, and I'm going to give mine, but I have a question for Robinson. Do you think it's when they're higher end seats where you have like 13 different ways you can adjust it, or
No,
just their base seats?
I think pretty much across the board.
I see. I think Nissan, their base seats are probably the most comfortable for me.
Yeah,
You
there are the
know,
zero gravity ones with
yeah,
aerospace engineering.
the seat thing to me and to most people really it comes down to your body fitting, the types of variable density foams that some engineer after a long drive has decided is best. And yes, I know they use computer programs and everything else, but they still do these seat of the pants test, and with all different body types trying to figure out what the best compromise is. I mentioned that Palisade, which when I first got in it, I didn't think the seats were going to be very comfortable at all, but on a long trip, because of the support and the firmness, you get out feeling terrific. So, Kathy, I hate to tell you this, but I don't think I think the Volvo is an interesting answer. I think Nissan definitely has terrific base seats, but you're really going to have to spend time in some of these vehicles, maybe go rent one to figure out whether or not the seat is truly comfortable, because it's a very inexact science as far as I know. Would you two would disagree with that?
No, I would absolutely agree. There's definitely a difference between short distance comfort and long range comfort.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the seats, like I'm gonna say GM, like in the Cadillacs and stuff like that, you sit in them, they're super comfortable when you sit in them. But then after an hour or two, you're like, why am I so uncomfortable? This seat, it felt so comfortable
Yeah.
a while ago, but they're just so soft, and there's not a lot of firmness there to really support you over long drives. So it's definitely a different, whatever you do most driving, obviously it will depend what works best for you, but there is definitely a difference.
I think
Agreed.
that's actually very good advice. If you're doing short trips, maybe softness is what you're looking for, but long trips, softness will hurt you. Yeah. All right. Any rant and raves this week? Anything you've noticed new where people are being either pleasant or stupid out on the road, or anything else? No.
I'm fresh out this week. Feeling
You
pretty
know,
good about.
the only thing I noticed recently was there seems to be a lot more video game driving. It's like people are tired of being cooped up, and when they do get in their cars, especially if they've got moderate traffic, they're just zipping in and out. It's almost like they're looking for a release from their frustration from being homebound, and doing just nutty things. I mean, it seems to be worse than usual. I guess my only advice is, if you're tired of being cooped up, be careful when you get behind the steering wheel. I don't know. I think that brings to an end, though, our MotorWeek podcasts, 242 of them under the belt. Brian Robinson and Greg Carlos, thank you both very much for being with us. And to all of you out there, be sure to check our MotorWeek.org website and pull down up from the top the stations in your area that carry MotorWeek. Public TV needs your support, and we're very proud to be a PBS program. And we're also over on the Motor Trend cable network. They do a great job. You can check us out there. Our YouTube/MotorWeek website has all of our latest tests on it. Basically, if you've got a screen, you can watch MotorWeek. And we thank you very much for being a part of our podcast. And as we always like to end these podcasts, thanks very much for being a part of the show. But we want to thank our audio engineer, Jim Bigwood, who always makes us sound better than we probably should. Greg's our producer, and our podcast creator, Bob Mixter, back at MPT. For all of us at MotorWeek, we'll see you soon. And thanks for being a part of MotorWeek.
You've been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by RockAuto.com. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at MotorWeek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.